Thank you for watching or listening to this free podcast of the Young Turks. We want to make sure that you get some portion of the show every day, but if you want the full show, which is actually 5 segments, come become a member and support independent media as well. tytnetwork.com/join. Meanwhile, enjoy the free podcast. All right, welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparin with you guys. You know what kind of a show we have for you guys today? An unbelievable, no, I'm kidding. It's just a normal show today.
I think it's actually gonna be a really incredible show today.
All right, let's see what happens.
It's gonna be tremendous. It's gonna be a strong show.
In order to prove myself right, I'm gonna take the day off.
Okay.
It's like, wait, this keeps getting better and better. No, yesterday was bananas. Every story was made of bullion gold. Okay, today's just oranges. That's my sense.
No, don't listen to him. Today's show is so good. I'm so excited about it.
Okay.
I get to talk about Mick Mulvaney.
Yeah, finally, the Mick.
No,
okay.
Yeah, there's stuff that we got to get to.
Okay, so we're going to do it in one sec. I just want everybody to remember tonight's election night. So that at 8 o'clock Eastern, 8:05, we're gonna go on air. It's gonna be me, John, and Ben, and we got a bunch of really important states. Iron Stash is up tonight, okay? So will he win, and then how good a situation is he in to take Paul Ryan's old seat, among many other states and elections that are so important tonight. So don't miss it. Tell your friends, your neighbors, and even Randy Gonzalez to tune in tonight to tyt.com/live. After all these years, will someone get Randy Gonzalez to watch? Okay, all right.
Do you think anyone gets that reference anymore?
It is so old.
It's so old, but it's so good. Those were the golden days.
I know.
Okay.
You know what that was? That was the golden days of America. Okay. All right, we move forward. Casper, take it away.
Yes. Recently, Donald Trump signed the Defense Reauthorization Act, and in that signing ceremony and in his speech, he applauded himself and his White House for doing more for our troops and for our veterans. But the reality is that there are a number of regulations that are put in place in order to protect our troops from predatory lending that the Trump administration wants to do away with. And recently, they have done away with something that would protect them, something known as the Military Lending Act. They have decided to stop supervising financial institutions that continuously prey on our soldiers. Okay, so let me give you the details of what's going on. First, there's Mick Mulvaney. He is the interim director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. That is the very bureau that is supposed to be supervising predatory lenders to ensure that they're not going after our troops and essentially pressuring them to take out loans that they can't afford, loans that usually have incredibly high interest rates. Well, the Bureau's supervisory staff typically conducted these checks to make sure that the lenders aren't charging military members exorbitant interest rates, pushing them into forced arbitration, or otherwise not following guidelines outlined in the Military Lending Act, a 2006 law that protects active duty military members and their families from financial fraud, predatory loans, and credit gouging. So now the CFPB is saying, yeah, we're not really gonna supervise anymore. You know, like we're just gonna let these lenders do what they wanna do.
It's true, it's Omarosa has it on tape. They sound exactly like that.
They don't have, no, Omarosa doesn't have it on tape, but we do have tape featuring Mick Mulvaney very openly sharing what his thoughts are on the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Remember, he is the temporary head of the agency while the Trump administration looks for someone to take his place. And so during Senate hearings, here is what Mick Mulvaney had to say about the CFPB.
Do you still believe that CFPB is a sad, sick joke?
Yes, sir, I do. And I'll be happy to tell you why. It is, to me, sir, one of the most offensive concepts, I think, in a representative government, which is almost completely unaccountable government bureaucracy.
So Mick Mulvaney goes to the CFPB. Again, this is an agency that's incredibly important. It was put together after the financial collapse in 2008 in order to protect consumers from predatory lending, right? And Mick Mulvaney goes in there and he's like, yeah, don't like any of this, dismantling it, sorry. And so that's what he's doing right now. And so don't be fooled when you hear that the administration cares about our military, cares about the troops, cares about our veterans. No, they don't. They care about the very financial institutions that fund their campaigns. Mick Mulvaney's top donors include payday lenders. And so, of course, he's gonna wanna deregulate. Of course, he's gonna wanna stop supervising and protecting our troops from these predatory lenders. I mean, it's of course gonna happen.
So, okay, first of all, the whole point is to protect consumers. So if you're a Republican, are you proud? Oh, we're not protecting consumers anymore. Okay, if you say, well, the average American, I don't give a damn about them, let the bankers crush them. I don't know what kind of conservative you are. It's not really a conservative position. But in this case, it's veterans. And these scumbags, the predatory lenders, that's what they are, target veterans at 4 times the rate of an average citizen. So when you see a veteran, you see someone you respect and that sacrificed for their country. When they see a veteran, they see a target. They see a mark. And Mick Mulvaney just came in and said, have at it, Hoss. You want to target veterans? There are a lot of veterans that are livid over this. And Army Colonel Paul Cantwell, for example, said, why do you think we have people standing guard in the military? And what he just did was he just took the people that were standing guard off the guard and just let people run in and defraud our veterans any way they like, basically. And that's his job. And why is it his job? Who pays his bills? The payday lenders, the predatory lenders pay Mulvaney's campaign donations. He works for them, he doesn't work for you. You think he cares about veterans? No, he cares about his donors. That's the only thing he cares about.
And it's not just veterans. Veterans are certainly included in these predatory tactics, but this also involves active duty members of our military who oftentimes are very young. They're out of high school, they have no credit history. And so since they're so young and financially inexperienced, they are a prime target of these payday lenders, of these predatory lenders, of these institutions. And so this Military Act of 2006 was so important, and luckily it's still in place. And the whole point of that was to ensure that these scumbags don't continuously target them with insanely high, unaffordable interest rates. And so in 2015, the Obama administration really did beef up that regulation to ensure that the CFPB was supervising these organizations to prevent them from, just leeching off of our military. By the way, the Bureau now says that it will only be able to take action against lenders when it receives a complaint. So they're not gonna do anything unless, you go through the insane bureaucracy of reaching out to them and filing a complaint.
Yeah, and by that time, as some of the veterans are and their advocates are pointing out, it's too late. Your life's already been ruined. They've already foreclosed on your house. They've already taken everything you have, etc. Now, I'm going to tell you in a second how much money that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau had saved veterans and Anna's right active service members as well. Okay, so it's a startling number. That's a number that the bankers had ripped them off of, and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau gave them back. Okay. And so I'm gonna save that for you in just a second. But understand that that's what they do. They look out for the service members. So the Military Lending Act, which was in place, but actually when you proactively regulate, as was happening in this case, it helped you to enforce the Military Lending Act. And that's why the bankers hated it, because they couldn't more effectively rip off people who'd served in the military, which again, they found to be really easy marks. So for whatever reason. What the guidelines were, you can't charge military members an annual interest rate of more than 36%. So it's not a tough standard. 36% interest rate is gigantic. Donald Trump bankrupted Taj Mahal because he took a loan that had too high an interest rate. You know what it was? 14%. And it was totally untenable and unsustainable. But yet they're willing to charge that to our service members and to average American citizens, and we're keeping him down to 36%. If we didn't have this law, they sometimes charge up to 300%.
Right.
So then the other provisions, they can't push them into forced arbitration because forced arbitration is rigged in favor of corporations oftentimes. They can't require them to allot portions of paychecks to pay back their loans. So that means they would just start taking it out of the service members' checks if they couldn't pay it back. But they might need that money for family, for their food for their family, for rent. Otherwise, they might be homeless, etc. But they would just grab their paychecks. And the Military Lending Act prohibited that, okay? And then the last one was creditors can't charge a penalty for early payment. Now that's mental. If I have the money and I'm willing to pay you so I don't have to keep paying that ridiculous interest rate, why can't I just pay you? They said, no, I'm gonna charge you a penalty for being a good guy and paying ahead of time.
You know why? Because they want their interest.
Yes, because they want to rob you blind. So the Military Lending Act is great. And what is it? It's regulation to protect veterans and service members. So then on top of that, it was regulated in a way that they didn't wait for your life to be ruined. They were proactive. So what did that do? How much did that save?
Let's go to graphic 6.
Okay. Proponents of the system say that it worked out well, and they say that the agency says it delivered more than $130 million in relief to service members since 2011 and handled more than 71,000 consumer complaints from them and their families. Is also taking enforcement actions after discovering lenders that broke the law. So several layers of regulation that you see there. What is the point of regulation? It is just laws meant to protect you. So you do regulation so that your local plant can't put toxic liquid into the nearby stream which your kids swim in. That's a regulation. In this case, you regulate the predatory lenders so they don't prey on our service members. That's regulation. You could do it before, in the middle, and after, and there's different gradations of it. And now Mick Mulvaney and the Trump administration said, don't worry about it. Let's see if they catch him afterwards. They'll catch him for a lot less. That's $130 million those lenders are gonna rob from our service members. Do you support the troops or don't you support the troops? And the reality is, progressives actually care about them. They're American citizens and they signed up to protect us, etc. So we wanna protect them. And what do conservatives say? And I don't think it's real conservatives, to be fair to conservatives.
Right.
I think it's the corrupt Republican politicians. They go, I don't give a damn about those people. It's a punchline for us. That ribbon you put on your car, support our troops, don't care. These guys pay our bills. Bankers pay my bills. Bankers, go rob them, go rob them. So they saved $130 million for you guys. You think bankers pay, with all their army of lawyers, you think they pay $130 million because they didn't do it? So they're gonna do it again, and they're gonna rob them again because they just took the cops off the street. That's what these guys are. Mick Mulvaney is one of the most corrupt people we've ever had in government. Drain the swamp my ass. This is exactly what the swamp is. And by the way, the Military Lending Act is wonderful. Why doesn't it apply to all of us?
Yeah, it's a great point. That's a great point. And look, the whole point of the CFPB was to protect all of us. But I got to give credit to Elizabeth Warren. The CFPB was her idea, and she did grill Mick Mulvaney rather aggressively during Senate hearings. And what you're about to watch is an example of all the different ways Mulvaney has gone after the CFPB. Take a look.
In 2012, you voted in favor of a Republican budget that called for eliminating the agency entirely. Is that right?
I don't have a specific recollection, but that sounds familiar to me.
Sounds
yes,
familiar. Okay. But that was only the beginning. You also voted for Republican budgets that eliminated the CFPB in 2013, 2014, and 2015. Does that sound right?
Again, yes, ma'am. There were occasional Republican budgets I didn't vote for, and I don't know what was in them, but generally speaking, I see your point. Yes, ma'am.
All right. And in 2015, you also supported a standalone bill that would have killed off the CFPB. Is that right?
That's correct. I think I was a co-sponsor of that.
Yeah, he is now the interim head of the CFPB, which is fitting for the Trump administration.
Why do you think they want to destroy the organization that protects consumers? Come on, man, get your head out of your ass. If you're a MAGA guy, you're getting that red hat dirty. Okay, get your head out of your ass. They're not here to protect you. They're here to protect their donors. Come on, man, it's brazen. It's like, you want to protect consumers from bankers? No, we're the Republican Party. We love bankers. There's no other explanation. Oh, you think, the banks are too regulated. Poor predatory lenders. What if they can't rip off service members and charge them 300% interest rate? Poor payday lenders. Does anyone in the country believe that? Anyone? You think that the victims are the bankers and the real thugs who shouldn't be protected are service members and veterans? Is that what you think? Okay, fine, then I guess you're that kind of animal. So Mick Mulvaney, one of the most corrupt guys, Donald Trump, who appointed him to be that corrupt, and he's very happy with him, to destroy any protection that whether it's service members or any US citizens get from the guys on Wall Street who want to rob you blind, have done it before, and now they're going to get to do it even more.
Yeah. Well, let's go from one disastrous administration official to another one. Ben Carson has announced that he would like to roll back Obama-era fair housing rules. Now, Carson is the head of the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and the whole point of that organization is to protect people in the United States, ensure that they have fair housing, affordable housing, but Carson wants to do the opposite. So he announced that HUD had formally begun the process of revamping the Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing Rule, a July 2015 regulation that had required communities and local governments receiving federal funding to identify and address any barriers to fair housing, like racial segregation. So there are racial segregation issues. A lot of these issues do have a lot to do with socioeconomic status. Minorities tend to have less income than white individuals, for instance. So you'll see segregation as a result of that in various communities. And so the Obama administration wanted to address that and ensure that there were affordable housing options in all communities. And Ben Carson wants to do away with that. So HUD announced in January that it was suspending the obligation of most local governments to comply with the rule until 2020 or in many cases 2025. Also, the Trump administration plans to pivot away from the efforts to integrate lower income housing into wealthier neighborhoods and instead push for an increase in housing supply overall. So I want to stop right there. This is an argument that I see all over the place from politicians, both Democrat and Republican. And the argument is there's low supply, and as a result, housing prices are skyrocketing. But that is not what's happening. Oftentimes, the new developments are not affordable housing developments. Oftentimes, they are luxury condos, they are luxury apartments. Places like downtown Los Angeles, for instance, have a very high vacancy rate because they've built all these luxury apartments that no one can afford, right? So it's a way that developers actually weirdly save money because they can claim that there was a loss or whatever it is in their taxes. In California, in Los Angeles specifically, all new developments are expected to have some affordable housing integrated, which is great. Do you know how many of those units have to be affordable? 15%. 15%, that's it, 15%. 15% is not gonna help get people off the streets in Los Angeles. We have a huge homeless issue in this city. But anyway, just wanted to address that because it's all BS. When they say, oh, we need new developments, they're always luxury developments that no one can afford.
So along those lines, I actually talked to a fairly wealthy businessman over the weekend. And you know what he said in response to what Anna said? She's 100% right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, yes. Yes.
Okay, so he said, well, I see what's happening here. They're building a whole bunch of housing and it's for people like me who can afford it. And what do they get? They get tax credits. Yes. Why are they getting tax credits for housing that we're going to buy or rent anyway? So why do they need tax credits to build housing for wealthy people? That doesn't make any sense. And he said, you know how many homeless people are on my block? He said 5. They live there. They live on the streets. So where's their housing? The problem isn't that rich people in Los Angeles don't have enough housing. The problem is that poor people don't have enough housing. So it's now, what does the Trump administration do? First of all, of course, they get an African-American guy to go and say, do you really need fair housing? It's a nice little trick, right? Hide behind minorities. So look, the Democratic Party does it from time to time too. okay? But in this case, it's the Republican Party doing it fairly brazenly. To me, if he had made a case for, look, here's my economic model for why more housing is going to lower prices, and let me show you 3 models where it worked, right? Here's where it worked in Portland or San Antonio, et cetera. Well, I'd say, okay, I don't think that's a crazy idea. Now, Anna makes a good point that it hasn't worked out that way at all. But if you could show me cases, I could see it conceivably working. The problem is you can't show me cases of that working because it doesn't work. And that's not how it's structured. It's structured so the politicians get rich from the guys who give them. Real estate is gigantic donors to politicians. It is one of the most understated donors in the country. They don't get talked about that often. They contribute a lot at the state and local level. And in return, they get billions of dollars of tax credits and don't actually have to give you any affordable housing.
Yes.
And finally, that quote that Anna read for you is to me the most critical one. That they plan to, quote, pivot away from efforts to integrate lower income housing into wealthier neighborhoods.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, we're done with it. We're not, HUD is supposed to be not for rich people. It's supposed to be for working poor, middle class, to help you to get housing. And here they are, they're saying, we're pivoting away from that. What are you pivoting to then?
No, but Carson is brazen in just his utter disregard for low-income communities. Let's go to graphic 12. This is another quote. Carson has denounced government efforts to desegregate housing in America as, quote, failed socialist experiments.
Yeah. Because in the South, when there was segregation, it probably would have worked out on its own. I'm sure that at some point they would be like, wait, why are we keeping African Americans out of the pools and out of the diners and out of the homes and out of the schools? Golly gee, I don't know. Why don't we just change our mind out? Well, we tried that for a couple hundred years. We tried that on slavery for a couple hundred years. It turns out they didn't change their mind. We tried it during the Jim Crow years, and then throughout 100 years after slavery. And it turns out they don't just change their mind and go, hey, you know what? Let's move into black neighborhoods and let's have blacks move into our neighborhoods. No, it turns out you had to do desegregation. And this guy, the puppet that he is, gets hired to come out there and go, when he's awake. I don't think we should do desegregation. Notice that I am black, so it's okay. Don't do desegregation anymore.
Let's not forget the aspect of housing that's also happening in cities like LA as housing, at least building and revamping communities, spreads to South LA, to now Inglewood, and next is Compton. This is just local right now. I'm sure it's happening in every other city. So then usually what people considered was black and brown communities will get run by all these housing increases, further pushing people out even further. So it's actually the opposite effect is happening. We're talking about how possibly they're pivoting away from desegregation and not bringing, and the thing is, the talk about low income housing, the mindset is that, these are projects or something. We're talking about places people can just live in. Everyone's not just homeless on the streets and trying to get into a place and then squat. We're talking about just normal living situations because of all these jobs that Trump is touting that he's done for the black and brown community in his whole 2 years in office. What is that doing for people being able to live where they are? Instead, the opposite effect is happening. People getting pushed further and further out. Transportation to get to these places is even harder. To maybe get to work. Everything is affected by where you live. We know how that works. But if the continuing advantages are given to people who have all of the advantages already, and now no one else can get anything else, and it's their fault, and now for getting pushed out.
No, you just made such a great point that I didn't even consider in the context of this article. People like Ben Carson and the wealthy donors, they're worried about low-income individuals infiltrating their rich neighborhoods. But what's really happening throughout the country, and especially in Los Angeles, is that wealthier people are infiltrating poor neighborhoods and gentrifying it and pushing low-income people out of the neighborhoods that they've lived in their entire lives, right? Now look, gentrification is a difficult, complex issue. It's not all good or all bad, but there is a housing crisis in the country right now. And the way that they're handling it is only exacerbating this issue.
Yeah, and JR and I had a great conversation about gentrification in one of the old school episodes. If you remember, you can get all the old school episodes, tyt.com/join to become a member, get all of our shows. And it partly depends. The reason Anna says not all bad is if you're a homeowner in a place like Compton and there's gentrification, your prices went up. If you're a renter, you're in trouble. You're gone, and then you got to move hours away from LA to be able to afford any housing at all. So it pushes poor people further and further away. I remember we had affordable housing in East Brunswick, the suburb that I grew up in New Jersey. Nobody exploded. There was no problems, right? And it helped to create a diverse background where people were friends with each other from different. We had middle class, we had rich people there, we had poor people in East Brunswick. It's fine, but people are so obsessed with no, all mine, all mine. And that's why they get guys like Ben Carson to do their bidding, and it's gross.
And I'll reiterate again, these poor housing, people that can't afford housing, is suddenly their community has houses that are $800,000. You're like, oh, I can't afford that. And they go, oh, you schlep. That's the thought process. We don't know the numbers behind it. $800,000, talking about minimum in these communities now. It's not the case it's not a case that you're a lazy ass and you don't know how to do anything. It's that you're not able to afford nearly $1 million houses. Think about that across the country, about how that works.
Who has a 20% down payment for an $800,000 house laying around? Who does?
It's in a lower income neighborhood. It's preposterous. So and that's how gentrification works. And so. But on the upside now, we will get bankers who could now sing "Straight Outta Compton."
Straight into Compton.
Yeah, that's right. Straight into Compton on a Bentley.
All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, more stories for you, including Trump's recent attack on Jeff Sessions.
You're right in the middle of this podcast. We got another great segment coming up for you. If you'd like the full show, which is actually 5 segments. Go to tytnetwork.com/join. You become a member, you support the show, you support independent media, and you get the whole 2-hour show ad-free every day. Let's go do it now. All right, back on the Young Turks. Plenty of comments here. Let me go to Twitter first. Dragon Lady Racer says, the fact that we have a separate law to protect service people from these types of lenders, besides the ones against all consumers, shows just how bad these type of bankers are. How is doing away with the Consumer Protection Bureau not a big deal for the Republican voters? They have debt too.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. I mean, they vote against their own self-interest all the time. They have no idea.
I think it's the power of propaganda. I mean, you have to think about the bubble that, people live in, where they get their news. You watch Fox News and all you hear is that the biggest threat to Americans are the others, right? And so that's a great distraction. So people aren't paying attention to the people who are really screwing them over.
Yep, Carly Wynn writes in, that man in the hat with mustache doing the Monopoly Man cosplay in the background there, hilarious. Thank you. I mean, we were too worked up in that segment to note how funny that was, but he was doing a great job. I am I Papito writes in, or is it I me? Anyway, they're building these luxury apartments like we're getting paid a livable wage. Good point, and we are unfortunately not. That guy that does stuff writes in on YouTube Super Chat. Remember it? That clip is classic gold. Yes, who said that? You should play that on Old School this week. It can be used not only as a tool, but as a weapon.
Yes.
So those are great points. And I'd like to note for the record that, where is it? I had it. I can't find it, so I just played a random.
Yes! Who said that?
Thank you.
Gonzalez? I'm coming.
I'm coming.
That's right, that's right.
Drastic times require what?
Drastic measures?
Drastic measures, yes! Who said that? Thank you. Drastic times require drastic measures.
Okay, last one.
Tell your friends, tell your neighbors. Tell Randy Gonzalez. I'm coming.
I'm coming.
Yes!
All right, we'll break out more of that on Old School. Okay, so tyt.com/join to become a member. Stephen Michael Davis says, please put a setting on the app for 1.5 speed. We will look into that. I'll put that on the list, brother. And then Zach Minute says, Trump and his cabinet act like they disdain poor people. Truth is, they love poor people. Poor people are desperate and easier to control. Unfortunately, there is some truth in that, at least within certain demographics in the country.
Yeah.
All right, let's go forward.
All right. The FBI has fired Peter Strzok. He was the FBI agent who was caught sending text messages, anti-Trump text messages to a lawyer for the FBI by the name of Lisa Page. And so he did testify in front of our lawmakers, and the Trump administration has been going after him aggressively. An investigation found that his anti-Trump bias played no role in the Russia investigation. He was immediately taken off of that investigation as soon as Bob Mueller knew about the text messages. But Trump is capitalizing off of the whole Peter Strzok story, and I believe is using this to further push for certain members of this investigation to get fired. So let me give you some of the recent tweets, and then also we'll talk a little bit about how he's attacking Jeff Sessions again. So Trump had tweeted that fired FBI agent Peter Strzok is a fraud, as is the rigged investigation he started. There was no collusion or obstruction with Russia, and everybody, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, so
whatever.
bored, Jesus.
Yeah, I know.
Stop tweeting the same thing, you maniac. He's tweeted that like 1,000,000 goddamn times. All right.
So, by the way, just this quick side note, there has been a GoFundMe page for Peter Strzok, and he was able to raise, or at least this page was able to raise $300,000 in less than a day and a half. I'm sure the number has increased since we last checked. Also, Trump had tweeted, they were all in on it, meaning Strzok and all that. Clear Hillary Clinton and frame Donald Trump for things he didn't do. Greg Jarrett on Fox and Friends, if we had a real attorney general, this witch hunt would never have been started looking at the wrong people. Okay, so that was his response to a Fox News segment. He's watching, he's live tweeting. You know, he's not TYT live tweeting, but he's tweeting to Fox
One
News. Yeah, and so in that tweet, he went after Jeff Sessions.
Okay, so there's two parts of the story. One is the firing of Peter Strzok. I think it's a terrible idea. What does it do? It encourages them. So far, Donald Trump has attacked James Comey, then fired him. Then he attacked Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, who was fired. Now Peter Strzok, attacked by Donald Trump, fired. What are you doing? You're just encouraging the monster. So everyone he's wrongly attacking, you go, okay, yeah, I don't want it to be a distraction. I don't want the president to tweet about it. That's the reality. You think Christopher Wray looked at this and was like, oh, I think what Peter Strzok did was so bad. He had a political opinion. All right, great, then why don't you fire almost everyone in the FBI? Well, how many people in the FBI voted for Obama? How many of them voted against Obama? By all accounts, the majority of FBI agents are Republicans. So should we fire every Republican in the building? Did they ever say anything bad about Obama in their private lives as Strzok did in his private life? My guess is overwhelmingly. So we're gonna go on a witch hunt and fire everyone who says something bad about Obama or Hillary Clinton? Are you kidding me? You'd have to fire most of the FBI probably at that point. How about Bernie Sanders? Now, Peter Strzok had terrible things to say about Bernie Sanders. I think Bernie Sanders is a great candidate. Do I think Strzok should be fired for that? No. Because of course they have political opinions. So all they did was they took those texts and they blew them out of proportion. And it's so obviously brazenly political. And the fact that we have to have these nonsense conversations as if we're not adults and we don't know what's going on. And then they get encouraged by Christopher Wray, you schmuck, they're looking to fire and imprison you. Do you know that the director of the FBI is of course a Republican, Chris Wray, okay? He's the one that just fired Strzok. Jerry Falwell Jr. is talking about how he should be imprisoned. Not just fired, imprisoned. So go ahead and encourage them like an idiot. How many times have we seen this movie? Now it's Republicans doing it. Usually it's Democrats who are like, oh, I'm so sorry. Even though you're totally wrong and I'm totally right, I'll fire the person. I'll get rid of them because it's a distraction. It's such cowardice and weakness. So, all right, so it's the Republicans that are doing it now at the FBI. They'll come for you next, you idiot. Now, let's go to the tweet, not the same thing about collusion, but the other one where he says, I wish we had a real attorney general. I mean, we've gotten used to a lunatic for president, an absolute lunatic. In my lifetime, I've covered politics for several decades now. No president attacks his own attorney general. in public. That's insane. That's insane. And says, you're not a real attorney general. And what did he call? He's called him weak and ineffectual, etc. over the weekend. Who does that? What kind of maniac does that? And okay, put aside the fact that he's clearly mentally unstable. Put that aside for a second. We're putting that aside for the president of the United States. Okay, now the second part of it is, hey, come on, man. Unless you're a totally dishonest actor or a sad, pathetic, brainwashed MAGA dude, okay, why do you think if he hates Sessions so much that he's not firing him? If he was worried about Sessions for other reasons, not to cover his own ass, but he is concerned that he's not doing a good job as Attorney General. Does Donald Trump not know how to fire people? I thought that's how he got famous, by firing people on Apprentice. He's fired plenty of people from the White House. Why doesn't he just fire Jeff Sessions? He doesn't fire him because it's obviously to cover up for his crimes. And he would be charged with obstruction of justice if he fired his own attorney general where the Justice Department was investigating him.
I mean, he would fire Jeff Sessions simply because Jeff Sessions recused himself.
And so, and that is why he keeps insulting him, trying to get him to quit so that he can say, well, I didn't fire Sessions. Okay, he happened to quit. So, and I happen to find some lackey, he's out of lackeys. A lot of them have turned on him. Maybe Rudy Giuliani, maybe he'll appoint one of his idiot sons or something. Okay, Donald Trump Jr. is the new Attorney General. Guess what? He fires Rosenstein and he fires Mueller. I'm cleared. You can't see this as political. If you can't see this as pathetic, political, you're in one of a couple of categories. One is you're a MAGA guy who just doesn't care. You're a loser, and all you care about is my guy, my guy, my guy. And you don't care about facts at all. You're pathetic. Or there's a lot of folks in the mainstream media who are like, he says this and she says that. I don't know. I don't know why they fired Strzok. I don't know why they want to fire Sessions. Look, a lot of them point out.
A lot of them are
that there's a good reason why he's threatening Sessions and trying to bully him, etc. But overall, even they're pulling their punches. It's super obvious what's happening. And when they pull their punches, we get into a false debate. This isn't a debate. Donald Trump clearly wants to end the investigation. He says it every goddamn day. It's an investigation of him. If the FBI was investigating you, do you think you could just end it? Be like, hey, you know what? I'm tired of this.
Yeah, you could just fire the people doing the investigation.
Yeah, well, hey, the FBI is looking into me for what? Money laundering or doing whatever other nefarious acts. I fire you. Or you try to somehow get the prosecutor fired. That would obviously be obstruction of justice, and you go to prison for a long, long time. I'm so tired of it.
Yeah, me too. You know what? Let's take a quick break. When we come back, an update on the whole Omarosa debacle. She has a new tape, and this time it has to do with racial slurs. We'll be right back.
Thanks for watching or listening to this free version of the Young Turks podcast. You know that the full show is at tytnetwork.com/join. If you become a member, you get the full show ad-free. We love you for watching or listening either way. There's gonna be a new free podcast tomorrow. You can keep on doing that. But if you wanna get the full show ad-free, tytnetwork.com/join.